Spike Cohen, former Libertarian candidate for vice president, and also founder and president of You Are the Power, a great organization that helps parents that have children that are ill, and a doctor suggested it's the parents causing the illness or the problem, have a second opinion on that.
This is a wild story because when Spike joined us previously, he had stories of parents that were having to battle to hold on to their children. Some of them who had issues where they might bruise easily. They might show signs of abuse. Yet once the state decides, here's what happens, it becomes very difficult to then get your kids back.
Spike joins us now on the Morning Extra. What's up, bud? How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again, guys.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. Brian Kemp, the Georgia governor, signed Ridge's law into law. The bill was named after the son of You Are the Power clients, Casey and Bailey Collins, and this gives those medically fragile children and their parents a second opinion, the right to a second opinion if they're accused of child abuse. And you told us a horrendous story about that happening and why it's so important. How did you find out that Brian Kemp was going to actually sign this?
Well, we had a pretty good feeling that he was either going to sign it or just let it go the 40 days of not vetoing it and just let it become law automatically when it passed both chambers of the legislature unanimously. That was a pretty good indication he wasn't going to try to fight that. And we found out shortly before, I believe, like just a few days before, that he did intend on actually signing it, which made sense considering it was literally unanimous. There was zero support for fighting against it. So, and we found out it was, I believe, 2 days ago that he did officially sign it.
Spike Cohen is our guest right here on the Morning Extra. And Spike, I'll tell you, we normally will hear from parents from time to time on a discussion we get into. That time when you were in studio, it was a good hour's worth where I'm just getting stuff into my email. People are reaching out to me on X of, I didn't know this, or somebody had a horror story of having to prove that, you know, whether it's a relative, a friend, somebody that, no, this has happened to people that we know, where they've had to prove to, whether it's the elementary school or the middle school or somebody, no, this did not happen the way you think to this child.
Anytime that we talk about this, anytime it's on the radio, anytime it's on a podcast, anytime we post about it, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds of people come out of the woodwork to tell us about their story or a story of a close loved one. And in our experience, when we start vetting these cases, the vast majority of the time, they turn out to be 100% true. And it is horrific. This is not, when we first heard about the Hernandez family and they're in Georgia, back in late summer of 23, we thought this was, rogue agents within defects who were doing this. And then when we put their story out and dozens and dozens of families came forward within a matter of days, we started vetting their cases, and it was the exact same thing. And we realized there was a pattern here. And the last time I was on your show, I talked about the roots behind why this is happening. They're getting state and federal funding every time they call a case abuse. And if they have to destroy a family in the process, that's how they get their funding for their agencies. And so you have at both the federal and state level, they are subsidizing a specific outcome, whether or not it's even true.
Gosh, it's heartbreaking. It's horrendous.
When you're looking for abuse, everything becomes abuse.
It's just like anything else. If you're looking for racism, you'll find it. If you're looking for good news, you'll find it. If you're looking for bad news, you'll find it. Spike Cohen's our guest on the Morning Extra. You Are the Power is the organization, and if you want to learn more about them, youarethepower.net is the website. This is the first one of these laws, Ridge's Law, first time in the Southeast, and you're hoping it'll set the precedent and pass nationwide and in multiple states and then a national law too. Can you explain what Ridge's Law is? Because we're kind of hit all around it. We've talked about stories of people that have been have faced these issues and problems, but can you kind of give us just a nutshell of what Ridge's Law is?
So in a nutshell, what Ridge's Law does is it requires that anytime there is an accusation of abuse by a medical professional, the parent has a right to get a second opinion, and the officials are required to notify the parents and make sure that they know that they have a right to a second opinion.
That's right.
So it's not just this right exists, but no one bothers telling them. They have to let them know that it exists. prior to this, and this was the case with the Collins family that Ridge Collins, this bill is named after him. They had to fight to even get the medical records of Ridge to try to find out what actually happened. And in the case of most of these families, if not all of them, they were told, oh, no, your kid's under custody. You can't request anything.
Unreal.
You can't get any records. We're dealing with it now. So it's not just, and I said this on the show before, it's not just guilty until proven innocent. It's guilty and not allowed to try to prove that you're innocent. It's the worst case scenario. What this does is it re-adds a level of due process. And it also, another thing that it does is it requires the accusing physician to actually note that they reviewed the child's medical records before making the accusation. And if that sounds absolutely insane,
it does.
That wasn't already the standard.
It does.
I agree with you.
And I'll tell you, Spike Cohen is our guest on the Morning Extra. It is one thing when you do have a case of child abuse, and when it does occur, okay, the state goes into effect, and now the machine and the justice starts moving. I can't imagine that oftentimes you will have parents that will then say, hey, I will fight with thousands of dollars to get the medical records and clean this sort of stuff up. Typically, if the parent's guilty, it's just kind of what happens. This is the opportunity to have parents that are innocent to have at least an opportunity to prove their innocence.
Exactly. And the other thing that happens is, we're thinking of what happens in a court of law where there's a presumption of innocence and there's a higher threshold for evidence and all of that. These things are being adjudicated in family court. So there could be criminal charges, and there usually are, and very often they never even bother taking it to trial because they know they have no case. But in family court, the judge really, especially in Georgia, has a lot of authority to decide what they can allow or not. And so we've had cases where, the parents come in having spent thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to get medical records and to get second opinions and all of this. They get in front of a judge and the judge goes, yeah, I don't like any of this. I'm just going to go with what the physician accused you of.
Oh my
what
God.
This does is it resets the precedent. And thankfully we now have the head of DFACS, Candace Brosey, on our side with this as well. What this does is it flips everything around. It's not going to fix everything, and it's not going to ensure that this never happens again, but it sets back up right that the assumption here needs to be that maybe there's another explanation, especially if there's literally already another explanation, which was the case with Ridge Collins and with every single family we've represented where these children had either already diagnosed or easily at that moment diagnosed severe medical conditions and chronic medical conditions that completely explained their bruising, their fractures, and everything else.
Yeah, for anybody else that's just kind of joining in, maybe they didn't hear you back in January when you were on the show. What happens is oftentimes a kid has bruising, and it's because of a medical condition. And then, like Spike said earlier, the doctors are basically paid. They get funding, they get money to just say, yes, this is abuse. And then these families are handcuffed, can't defend themselves. I just want to make sure that everybody kind of has a good nutshell, a good understanding of what the organization You Are the Power is. And again, the website, youarethepower.net. And then also why Ridge's Law passing in Georgia is so important.
And I think it's also important, too, and Spike, if you could speak to it, you can have sometime an overzealous pediatrician. You don't know exactly where this is going to start from, but once it starts, that machine gets moving on you.
This could be, and before I answer the first two questions, I want to address that. You could have a case where a pediatrician once said that it wasn't abuse and it blew up in their face and turned out it was, and so they're never going to let another kid with a bruise come through their office without them calling it abuse, even if there's an actual explanation for it. So it could be CYA. It could be, they had an incident where a kid ended up, having a real bad situation. And the thing is, it's bad enough if an overzealous pediatrician makes the accusation, but it's not just them that gets paid to call it abuse. Everyone in the pipeline, DFACS, or whatever CPS is called from state to state, the family court judges, all of the reunification centers, the foster care facilities, everyone that's involved in this, it's like an industrial complex. And it's built around what is essentially child trafficking under the color of law. And notice I said under the color of law, not legally. This is not legal what they're doing, but they do it under the color of law, and they're the ones in charge of overseeing it. So they're overseeing themselves and finding that they're doing it just right. So to go back to the other thing, you are the power. What we do is we find people, and this is one case of it, but we find people who are being abused by local and statewide officials. We get all the information about what's going on to them, what's happening to them, and we bring it to the public and encourage them to join us in calling for the officials to back off and do the right thing. Since 2024, we have had a 100% success rate in doing
Goodness. That. I mean, it's pretty darn impressive, man. 100%. I don't know that anything happens at 100%. Anything, nothing happens at that. So what you're doing is gosh, just it's wonderful for families. It's good for folks here in the state of Georgia, and it's just the organization putting the information out there. Because prior to you coming on this show, I had never heard of it, and I guarantee you, people listening right now, I bet the majority, even though you've been here a few times talking about it, don't know about it, doesn't know it exists, and that's why I want to encourage everybody to go to youarethepower.net. What if somebody wants to help out, or somebody has a friend that's in this situation? They're in this situation themselves. How do they get a hold of you? How do they get your expert advice and attention?
You go to youarethepower.net. We have a contact form. Fill it out. We will have our team look at it, and we're pretty quick on turnaround. We now have a dedicated vetting team, which we're actually in the process of expanding. We are actually now creating its own task force that will just handle the family reunification things, because that's growing into its own thing that needs its own dedicated team. But whatever you come to us with, we've had people that come to us with, cases where corrupt city officials are trying to steal their house because they want to buy it, or they want to, change it into something that's going to make them money, turn it into a strip mall or something. We've had people trying to be kicked out of convalescent homes. We've had elderly grandparents who were living with their grandkids, and the city thought there were too many people in the house, and they tried to kick the grandfather out. We've had all sorts of different cases of people who are just being abused by out-of-control government officials who didn't realize that we could sick tens of thousands of people on them to tell them to back off and do the right thing. And by the grace of God, that I give all the praise to God and all the glory to God. Amen. In this. I don't believe human beings can have a 100% success rate without a moving of the Holy Spirit, and that's just my personal opinion.
Mine too.
But the bottom line is, when we find people who thought they were on their own and who thought they were going to have to fight this Leviathan machine on their own, we let them know, no, we're on your side, we've got your back, and we don't stop fighting until we win.
This is an organization that fits well with what we do here at Xtra and on the Morning Xtra, Tug and Los, along with Dre, too. I want to read you before we cut you loose, Spike, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on and talk about this. And good on Brian Kemp to sign this into law.
Yes.
But I want to read you, because this is going to resonate with our listeners, I feel certain, from youarethepower.net. Be the solution. You are the power. We find people who are being disrespected by their government. We talk about that a lot on this show. And organize all of us to get the respect we deserve. The mission is to spread and act on the principle of human respect. And I think that's something that we all share on Xtra 106.3. Man, great work, Spike. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, guys.